So we always assume that the biochemistry is important. The only exception to this is the idea of obesity. We think when you grow a beer belly, it's because you eat too much, because of the calories. And this is just nonsense, because there's biochemistry there too. Something is causing the fat cells in your belly to store too much fat. And the question is, we had to think, well, what are those forces on the fat cells, both long-term and short-term? And this is always true. And in fact, I would almost suggest that this black box concept is not even a hypothesis. It's just a fact. It's like saying the Earth is not flat. It's like it's not saying what the shape of the Earth is. It's just saying the Earth is not flat. Likewise, saying the black box counts and not calories. It's just saying the biochemistry matters.
Welcome to the Calorie Conundrum Podcast with Coach Strick. Join us as we expand the weight loss conversation to beyond just calories and dare to ask the question, why does eating less and exercising more sometimes not produce the desired results? Here's Coach Strick to discuss this Calorie Conundrum.
Well, hello everyone, this is Coach Strick, and today we have another podcast from the Podcast Archives. Today, Adam Kosloff shares his views about fat loss and the idea of the black box. I feel this concept perfectly captures how I personally view weight loss, and hopefully this idea will get you thinking about weight loss and how the body works. Stick around to the end where I will share more about the concept of the black box and where this idea came from. But for now, enjoy this podcast with Adam.
Well, hello everyone, this is Coach Strick. I'm here with Adam Kosloff. Adam Kosloff is a writer. He's written for movies, TV, and he's authored around 29,000 articles for online websites, varying different topics. He's the creator of the websites whylowcarbdietswork.com with a dash in between each word and caloriegate.com. He's also the author of a couple ebooks that are relevant to our topics, and that's the Low Carb Survival Guide and Beyond Calorie Gate, and his newest one, I believe, and it's also free on his website, caloriegate.com, is the Black Box. Adam, how's it going?
Great, Coach Strick. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Thank you for being on. I was reading around a lot of your material, and I found out that the reason why you kind of got into this was because you read Gary Taubes' book, Good Calories, Bad Calories, and you said it inspired you. Like, what in his book inspired you to create the websites and the ebooks?
Well, I'm a contrarian by nature. I love the counterintuitive ideas. I'm kind of a skeptic. And when I read Taubes' book, I resonated with me because I feel I bought the logic. I bought the arguments. It seemed pretty tight, and I couldn't believe that more people weren't into it. I was surprised that the book didn't touch off an immediate revolution. And as I got sucked into the nutrition world, I started eating a lower carb diet after reading that book, lost weight, felt better, etc., like many people do. And then, but then I got into the science of it because that intrigued me. I didn't get into this from a fitness or diet angle, but more from an intellectual angle. And what I couldn't really get my head around was why people had so much trouble with the calories in, calories out idea. That it was just sort of people were stuck on this idea that it's all about calorie, quantity, and that quality of foods didn't matter. And I was just inspired by his lectures and his thinking to build a site, whylowcarbdietswork.com, which is the most awkward site in the world to say, because I built it for SEO purposes. And I don't know, I got sucked in it from there. I started writing books corresponding with the carborati, as my wife calls them, and just started reading more and more about this topic.
So, you have like I said, you have the same kind of mentality as I have myself. Mm-hmm. And I had this question set for later on in our conversation, but since you kind of hit on it right there, I'm going to ask you right now. It's like, why do you think people are so resistant to something other than calories in, calorie out? Like, why are people resistant to that idea, other ideas?
It's fantastic. It's a fantastic point, and I think there's a lot of biases that people have. The biases towards consistency, the biases towards what we hear first. We get anchored to certain ideas and certain concepts and negotiations. And we have a very hard time to pull away from that entirely and think in a new paradigm. So if you've grown up all your life and you think the Earth is flat, everything that you see will try to confirm that idea that the Earth is flat. You're like, well, I look outside and I see the road looks flat, therefore the Earth is flat, and they will ignore evidence to the contrary. So we're very primitive, and our brains just aren't naturally logical.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean also the other thing is like that when a lot of people believe a certain concept, there's a social proof element to it. So if your neighbor thinks calories in, calories out is right, if your doctor thinks that, you're going to feel pressure to feel that too, even if you see evidence to the contrary. So there's a lot of logical inconsistencies to the way we think about diet, nutrition, and science in general.
Yeah. So you wrote the ebook called The Black Box, and
Yeah.
can you explain like how your ideas of the black box are different from other causes of obesity that people have blamed on obesity, like eating too much or working out not enough? How is the black box different from those ideas?
Sure. Let me just walk you through like where this concept is. We all know that if you go from 120 pounds to 220 pounds, you gain 100 pounds of fat. You have to have eaten more than you've burned off. So there has to be a calorie surplus. It's the law of energy conservation or conservation of mass, right? There has to be more that's put into your body than is taken out of it. And so this is true anytime you gain any kind of weight on your body, whether you're gaining fat on your tummy, like whether you've got a goiter, whether a woman grows a baby in her belly, there always has to be calories or mass to make that stuff in your body, right? But at the same time, there also has to be a way that the calories, the energy that you eat gets into your body, it gets into your tissues. So, for instance, there has to be biochemistry that puts the food that you eat into the baby that you make as a pregnant woman. And the same thing if you're growing cancer. There has to be chemistry that's involved that transforms the food that you eat into the cancer. So I call that biochemistry. It's complex biochemistry, the black box. Like who knows what's going on in there? But it has to happen. So anytime there's growth on the body, two things must happen. There has to be calories, they're facilitative, and there has to be a black box, no matter what you're growing. Now, in any other kind of growth in the body, we automatically assume that the biochemistry is important. If I'm growing like another arm, I'm going to think, okay, well, something's happening that's making me grow this arm. It's not that I'm eating too much. If if a woman grows, the pregnant analogy is, I think, the best one, because when a woman grows a baby, it's not because she's eating too much. Like, I can't grow a baby if I eat 10 Big Macs, 100 Big Macs, because my body can't make a baby. There has to be a specific set of biochemical circumstances. And so we always assume that the biochemistry is important. The only exception to this is the idea of obesity. We think when you grow a beer belly, it's because you eat too much, because of the calories. And this is just nonsense, because there's biochemistry there too. Something is causing the fat cells in your belly to store too much fat. And the question is, we had to think, well, what are those forces on the fat cells, both long-term and short-term? And this is always true. And in fact, I would almost suggest that this black box concept is not even a hypothesis. It's just a fact. It's like saying the Earth is not flat. It's like it's not saying what the shape of the Earth is. It's just saying the Earth is not flat. Likewise, saying the black box counts and not calories. It's just saying the biochemistry matters. Does that make all sense? Does that make sense?
Exactly. Basically, you're saying that the reason why people get overweight or obese is it could be any number of things.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily have to do all with calories.
Right. And I think, and I'd like to distinguish, because in this nutrition world, in something that the stuff that Gary Taubes written about and other people have written about, there's another idea that is related to the black box, and it is called the carbs-insulin hypothesis. And this is the idea that carbohydrates, when you eat them, they stimulate the release of insulin, which is the main fat storage hormone. So the idea that eating too many carbs will make you secrete too much insulin, which will cause you to gain fat. And conversely, when you cut your carbs, you go on a lower or better carb diet, you're going to reduce your insulin and you're going to burn fat. And then that is a related and a scientific idea, and I believe that is probably correct for 80% of the time for 80% of the people, that it's the carbs is the problem, you got to cut the carbs, etc. But and the insulin is what you want to count instead of calories. However, there's all sorts of other hormones and enzymes that can come into play. Cortisol, the sex hormones, an enzyme called lipoprotein lipase, or LPL, hormone-sensitive lipase, leptin. So you got a whole bunch of biochemistry that can be important in addition to or other than carbs and insulin. And so the takeaway message for people who are trying to lose fat, I think, is it's not about the calories necessarily. It's about the biochemistry, and trying to unlock your biochemical mystery starts with probably thinking about the carbs, but it could require more in-depth investigation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. So,
yeah.
Yeah. Your book, your ebook, your free ebook that you wrote, the Black Box. I think the analogy you wrote in there about the South Park, the underpants homes. I think I laughed out loud when I read that because it was perfect. It's exactly what people do. It's just like we have something here, too many calories, question mark. And then people get overweight, and it's like, what is that? What's in that question mark that's what you're talking about in the black box. It's like, what is actually causing you to store more energy than than you're getting rid of, and causing you to be obese. So, I think the book, the free ebook is worth being, worth picking up just for that one analogy of the.
Well, thanks, Rick. I appreciate it. It's true. It's also like, imagine you flick on a light switch and the light bulb's not working, right? If you're just fiddling, you're fiddling with a light switch and you're flipping it on and off, you're changing your bulbs, maybe it's not going to work because the problem is in the circuitry in the wall. And if you never think about what's in the wall, and you're sitting there changing the light bulb a million times and flipping the switch on and off, you may never solve the problem because it could be a problem with the circuitry. Likewise, it's kind of like it could be a problem with the black box, like what's going on inside. And yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And so you hit on it right there, and I was going to ask you, and I think I know the answer now, but everyone's different.
Right.
But what do you believe the biggest factor that could help the most people lose weight? What do you believe that factor is? I think you mentioned it as reducing carbs. Is that what you believe?
I believe so. I think it's like, the 80-20 rule or the Pareto principle. What's the smallest thing that's going to give the best results? And I think it's probably carbs, because we're watching your carbs, improving your carbs, because something like 2/3 of Americans are insulin resistant, and that means you're just not responding correctly to the insulin signal. So for most of these people, I think cutting carbs in some respect is going to help. It's not necessarily going to cure it, and not everyone is going to respond to the diet in the same way. But from the research I've read, it just seems like it's a superior kind of diet to almost any other diet out there. It does not only help with weight reduction, which is important, but as we were talking about beforehand, it's not just about the weight. It improves blood lipids. Like, for instance, on most people who go on these diets, their triglyceride levels improve, their HDL levels improve, markers for inflammation improve, A1C levels are improved for diabetics, and so you have this basically, what it seems to do for a lot of people is cure or at least ameliorate insulin resistance, which is at the core of so many of the diseases that kill people today. Heart disease, cancer, diabetes, so it's I don't know if it's the cure-all to everything, but it's certainly like a really amazing treatment.
Yeah, a good place to start, at least, reducing carbs, and especially the bad carbs.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and most the calories in, calories out, they say eat less, exercise more. And my question to them, is always like, the catch is you can starve people. That's the thing. I think that's where we get confused, especially when people are like, oh, it has to be calories in, calories out, because you can starve people. And my question would be, where's the line between dieting or reducing calories and starving people? And,
Yeah,
and I don't think we want to go around starving people. But what do you have to say about reducing calories and the difference between reducing calories and starving people?
Well, that's a fantastic point, and it's true. Listen, I'm not. I was corresponding with some doctor. I think it was Oprah's doctor. Some muckety muck doctor who wrote saying to me, said that she was a little skeptical of this concept because there were no fat people in concentration camps, right? If you starve people enough, they're going to start to lose fat. And one of the rebuttals I mentioned to her was that there's this Taubes mentions in his book about this genetically obese kind of rat called a Zucker rat. And cruel scientists did this experiment where they starved these Zucker rats to death just to see what would happen. And it turned out that they did lose a little fat, but when they died, they were still obese. They were 6 times fatter than a normal lean mouse. And instead of burning their fat for fuel, which they had plenty of left, they decided their bodies burn their muscles, and eventually they burn their hearts. So they burned their hearts for fuel and died of heart failure because meanwhile the fat was just sitting there. And I think that's an important concept to remember, that this is just, okay, you can starve people, but even the people in the concentration camps, they lost muscle, they lost internal tissue, I'm sure their organs were weak, and so this idea of we're going to brutally starve people to make them lose fat just doesn't make sense. And even those people in the concentration camps, they still had fat on their lips. It wasn't like they were at 0% body fat. So there's something that's going on that we have to think about, well, what's happening in the fat tissue? We can't just starve people energy-wise. Right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
So, when you sign up for the Black Book free ebook, you also send a series of emails.
Right.
And I learned a lot. There's a lot of resources in those emails that people can, videos and links and other things to, other research to follow up on. But one thing you talked about in one of the emails was you're talking about the different types of weight loss, and one was, you called them the calorie wizards, and that's just the calories in, calories out people.
Yeah.
Then there's the carb insulin, too many bad carbs is bad.
Right.
And the point that you were making in this one email was the fact that when those two groups of people define what causes obesity, you said they use what they think causes obesity in the definition of of it. So can you talk on that for a little bit?
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you looking at the series. I'm trying to expand that series too, like to add more emails and to it. But the gist is, if you talk to like the wonks, about the people who are like obesity researchers, they're going to tell you that the definition of obesity technically is that when you're storing too many of a kind of fat called triglycerides in your fat tissue. That's the definition of it. And so there's two assumptions. There are two schools of thought. The one about the calories in, calories out says, well, obesity, they add to this definition. They said obesity is when you eat too much food and you don't exercise enough, and that causes you to store too much triglycerides in your fat tissue. And the carbs insulin people come along and say, no, you're wrong. Obesity is when you eat too many carbs that are bad, and that causes too much insulin to happen, and that causes you to store too much triglycerides in your fat tissue. And so there's this kind of back and forth, and it's assumed that there's only these two ideas, so that people are thinking, well, it has to be one or the other. Versus the more logical thing was say, listen, let's not make this definition more innate. Let's just call it what it is. Obesity is when you're storing too many triglycerides in your fat tissue. So what causes it are all the long-term and short-term forces on the fat tissue. That's it. And and that doesn't necessarily mean. So you're getting away from carbs and calories and sort of diet and thinking biochemically. Just like the same thing for a cancer. What causes cancer to grow? Well, all the long and short-term forces on a cell that might make it cancerous. What causes a baby to grow? All the long and short-term forces on a woman's, in a uterus or whatever that's going to make the baby grow. So you're just ripping away this concept of, diet is very important because it can indirectly affect triglyceride storage, but it's only indirect.
Exactly. So basically what you're saying is it's not that calories don't count, it's that calories affect the biochemical, mechanisms in the body. And
exactly.
Yeah. And eating more carbs does the same thing. And so it's not that it's all about the carbs, it's just that carbs is affecting the body in a certain way that can actually lead to putting the triglycerides back, into the fat cells.
Right. And there could be other factors involved too. That's the whole point. You're trying to come up with a way of explaining obesity that's going to encompass all these other concepts, like the fact that medications can make people fat. So why does that work? Well, is it because they just make you eat more? No, you got to think, well, what are these medications doing to the fat cells? Are they making them more insulin resistant, for instance?
Exactly.
Like that, right?
And you said medication, but I mean, there's so many other things that it could be. I mean, it's the types of fats, it's the medications, it's the whole study of obesogens nowadays.
Absolutely.
So there's so many factors, and that's why it's kind of hard for me to believe that people just keep saying calories in, calories out is the only thing, especially when they've experienced the calories in, calories out not working themselves. And it's like they've experienced it, they counted the calories to the T, they've worked out, they've counted those calories, and they still haven't lost weight, but yet they still believe that calories in, calories out is the only way to do things, and that's what confuses me. But
well, it's a simple story, you know what I mean? Like, part of what makes these things, you look at the diets that are like so popular, like they all have a very, very simple and compelling story that seems right. Like, eat less, move more. In 4 words, you're told how to lose fat, right? Or don't eat too much. Don't eat too much. 4 words to tell you how not to get fat, right? It's super simple. Same thing with vegetarians. Don't eat meat, or even paleo. Eat like a caveman, or even low carb. Don't eat too many carbs. So these are simple ideas. The reality is more complex, but because they're so simple and they tell a good story, they kind of spread like a good joke.
Yeah, and people love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Adam. So let's change the subject here just a little bit. Can you tell us about the research that you've done and the research you found on the best type of exercise?
Yeah. Well, I'm just like a journalist, blogger. I'm not like a health expert. I hope your listeners know that. Like, I'm just like a guy.
Regular guy.
Regular guy. I've read a lot about this stuff. I would say a few years ago I met this guy named Fred Hahn. He's a trainer in New York, and I read his book called The Slow Burn Fitness Revolution, and he talked a lot about kind of busted some myths about exercise and got me on his training program called where you basically do high intensity, slow weightlifting training. Using heavy weights, and it's really helped me, and my wife's now on it. We're both getting really good results. So that's the kind of thing I do, which is basically half an hour a week. You're lifting really heavy weights really slowly, and it's been helped me, and I know it's helped other people.
Do you know any what the reason for that, or what the research behind that is? Do you have any idea on that stuff?
I do. I mean, Fred's got some good lectures online. I mean, one of the things that I used to like run and do a lot of yoga and stuff. And since I started doing this, I kind of dropped that stuff. And one of the ideas that I remember Fred talked about was that when you're doing exercise, you're weightlifting. You're trying to build these. I think they're the slow twitch muscles. Basically you want to
fast twitch muscles.
Fast twitch muscles, right. By doing this intense exercise, and that. A lot of the benefit from the exercise comes during the recovery. So you're working really hard, and then you've got to rest your body, and as you rest, you get stronger. And one of the other big takeaways that I didn't really realize was how important muscular strength is.
Yeah.
That's really important to not just for in terms of insulin sensitivity, which it helps with some people, but also just general stamina. And I have 2 small kids, and I can tell you, like, now that I'm stronger, it's so much easier to lift them up, and I don't hurt my back, and so I'm really grateful that I've done some good exercise.
Yeah. All right, and so one more good question here, and that's if you had a magic wand, or if you were the president or something, and you could change like one thing or help people learn just one subject or topic, what would that be? What would you change, or what would you drill into people's heads if you had the wand or you had the power?
The black box counts.
Yeah.
I think so, because I think that like the calories in thing is the heart of the beast. It's like I would say the food pyramid I think is bogus, and so I would say the food pyramid is like Darth Vader, right? It's causing all these problems. But the calories in, calories out idea is the emperor, and we need to destroy the emperor if you ever want to have a chance of knocking out Darth Vader. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you. I believe that the black box idea is genius. And I'm like you. I don't know why more people aren't listening to people like you and reading more on this kind of ideas, because I mean it just the black box really answers a lot of questions. It's just not all about calories in, calories out.
Or even about all carbs, right? It's like this is one of these things. Like, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but like just reading today this morning, some people are all like, well, people in Okinawa and Catawba, these places where they eat a high carb diet and they never get obese and they never get these diseases, and so people see this and they say, well, these cultures didn't get fat and they ate carbs, therefore the carbs insulin thing is bogus, therefore it's all about calories. And you can say, well, no, like these people, their black boxes were fine. Sometimes it might take a diet full of sugar and flour to break your black box, and vegetable oil or whatever, some bad thing, and then once that happens, then your black box needs a different kind of treatment.
Yeah, I mean, you never know really what's breaking your black box, and that's the hard part in the investigation of finding out what exactly is causing your problem.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a lot of things that you can take. You can guess and say that, hey, maybe it's these processed carbs that we never ate before. 99% of human history, or all these artificial colorings, flavorings, and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So it could be anything. Yeah.
Right.
So, all right, Adam. So, if the listeners or the viewers want to learn more about you or get more information about what you're doing as far as the calories in, calories out things that's going, where can they go?
I thank you, Coach Strick. They can go to my website, caloriegate.com, and download that report. It's available for free on my website, and you'll have a follow-up email series that just contains, I'm trying to build that up, but it'll basically, the idea is to kind of, I call it breaking the spells of the calorie wizards. There's all these kind of bad ideas we have because we've grown up in the calories in, calories out paradigm. So it's just walking you through, here's a myth that everyone believes. Let's unpack this and figure it out. The idea is, if you understand, I believe that if you deeply understand what obesity really is, you have a better fighting chance of dealing with it.
Yeah, I really recommend everyone going and getting that free ebook, the black box at the caloriegate.com, because, like I said, there's good information in there, but then also that follow-up email series is really good, and it can point you in a lot of different directions, and it has a lot of different resources that you can follow up on. But Adam, thanks for being on the show today. I really appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon.
Coach Strick, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
I hope this interview with Adam has you thinking differently about weight loss. During our discussion, we talked about the idea of the black box. The concept of the black box originated from Season 2, Episode 17 of the TV show South Park. That episode was about these gnomes, they called the underpants gnomes, that were going around taking everyone's underpants. I know, totally ridiculous, but hang in there. During the episode, the master plan of the gnomes was revealed. Their plan was presented and it looked like this. Phase 1, collect underpants. Phase 2, ? Phase 3, profit. Basically, they believed that if they collected underpants, then that would result in profit. The how, though, was a big question mark, or a black box in which the contents are unknown. In his ebook, Adam related the idea of the black box to weight loss. So the master weight loss plan looks like this. Phase 1, eat less, exercise more, eat certain types of foods like low carbs, etc. Phase 2, ? Phase 3, weight loss. Where once again, the how this actually happens is a big question mark. Like Adam said in the interview, the eat less, exercise more recommendation is simple on the surface and seems to make sense, but the human body is far more complicated. I hope the information on this podcast and the experiences and expertise of the guests gives you hope if you have tried the traditional methods for weight loss with less than optimal results. That is why I created this podcast, and that is also why I created the WHAM Fam. The WHAM Fam stands for the Weight Loss and Muscle Building Family, and it is the free membership over at calorieconundrum.com. This membership gives you access to podcast transcripts, bonus interviews, free webinars, free health and fitness challenges, special discounts, and access to the free WHAM Fam Facebook group. I hope you will join our weight loss and muscle building family. And with that said, this is Coach Strick saying thanks for listening, and remember, when calories in, calories out doesn't work, that, my friend, is a calorie conundrum.
This podcast, including Coach Strick and guests, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects for the use of any information contained herein. Coach Strick and/or guests may recommend products or services in which they have a direct or indirect financial interest. To find out more, please visit www.calorieconundrum.com.